Okay, so last week we talked about the square, and I'm going to read a little bit more from this. Time involves sequence and repetition. These two aspects can be applied in whatever cycle you choose, whether a day, a year, a breath, or a heartbeat. The duration is unimportant, but the pattern is everything. Applying time, which includes sequence and repetition, to an image that is essentially two-dimensional, an image in the mind, is the basis of prayer and ritual. This is how it works. Then, with suitable preparation in the physical world, you get the bridge you need to bring your idea into reality. So there's a, let's see, I need to share my screen here. So this is just, this is a typical chart like we always see, where you have time, the time axis at the bottom and the value axis on the left side. And then within that grid work, we can chart just about anything, right? Any fluctuating value to great precision. So this is just like one of the aspects of the square that it symbolizes is measurement. It's measurable, and this kind of diagram shows that we can measure things to a high degree of precision by using the square. Now here are some notes here. There are several ways we use squares. We use it as a spreadsheet. We use them for calculation, of course, in a spreadsheet. We use them for grid work, where we can plot out many different forms and activities. And like I said on the other one, we have time value descriptions. But here's something that's probably not so obvious. And this is where we get into how the symbol of the square works in the mind. And you've heard, the term framing in linguistics, right? It's how we frame a concept that gives it its meaning. And even like if you're a photographer, you're looking for the right image, and so you'll do this. You'll frame what you're looking at, so that you can tighten it in and better define it. This is like a function of the square. I know it sounds really abstract, but we'll get more into it. There's also the idea of tabulating, which when you look at like a multiplication table, it's laid out on a square with on a grid work with the calculations shown. And it's interesting that the word tabulate has the word table in it, or at least the root part of it. And so just if you get into the feeling of what it is like to have a work table, you're a craftsman or you're technician of some kind, you've got your work table with all the tools, everything is organized. And again, this is in terms of framing. You've framed an activity. The tools define the activity, you define the activity, what you put on the table defines the activity. So whereas the circle, when we were talking about the circle, is kind of an expansive feeling, the square is a constriction. It's a defining contraction of that feeling. So let's see. Once a pattern such as this is established, it becomes a nexus in the mind, a living thing. It begins to breathe and grow. As it grows, it draws to itself all of the substance it requires for manifestation. It has to manifest. Otherwise, there would be an imbalance between the mind and the physical. Whatever exists in the mind must exist in the physical, and whatever exists in the physical must exist in the mind. This is the law. If its existence is untenable, either in mind or the physical, the form will disintegrate. So let's see. So getting back to this, when we think of the square in terms of creation, we have the four elements of creation: fire, air, water, and earth, which is also what's indicated in the Yod-He Vav-He in the Jewish text and in the Kabbalah. So there's something about the square that is very integral to the process of creation. And it's like in one sense, when we go to build a house, we have to build the foundation first. And Jesus talked about, foundation of a house, making sure that it was, on solid ground, on rock. So it's not just the convenience of constructing a square building, but it's also has this symbolic quality to it. And the thing about symbols is that they are operational on many different levels simultaneously. So when we're dealing with a symbol such as this, we're looking at it in terms of not just a mind or idea, but energy. Because mind, wherever we put our attention, where attention goes, energy flows, right? So when we work with the symbol of the square, that we're flowing energy into what this is embodying. So, and one of the things that it embodies is this idea of opposition, because in a square, you have two pairs of opposites. You have this face and this face, this face and this face, and like in astrology or even at a dinner table, you're going to have a certain kind of relationship, a certain kind of energy is going to flow between these two people and between these two people. See, and then there will be a different kind of energy going from left to right. Now, of course, this can be overridden by any number of factors, but I think you will see that there's something to this opposition, this four corners of the world, the four elements of creation, where and also the reason for an opposition, the reason for separating two things like that is because we have the aspect or the idea of the tension of the opposites. So it's like in cell mitosis, for instance, you've got where the genetic material within the cell gets pulled in two opposite directions, right? And it's in that tension of the opposites that boom, two new cells come into being. So in magnetism and electricity, in just about any physical way that we work with energy, this principle of opposition and polarity takes place. So all of this is consistent with the square, with the symbol of the square. Now, one of the things we can think of too in the feeling of the square is that we have that stability. We're working with stability. So Rosemary, like the exercise that we worked with, developing the axis, the vertical axis and the side to side and the fore and aft axis, this is essentially, that's a cube that describes a cube. It's the core of the cube. So that just lends enormous stability to a person, not just physically, but energetically. And then if the physical and the energetic aspect of us are stabilized, then our emotional and mental aspects will automatically be stabilized. So there you have this happening and then this happening as a result. You see, it's the cross, really, and this is what the cross symbolizes. It's the union of opposites, right? So in thinking of, yeah. So stability is important, and especially whenever we want to create something, because just like a workbench, if we're working with something complicated on a workbench, we want to make sure that that workbench is absolutely stable. And I remember when I was in woodworking, I read an article on on one of these old machines coming out of the 19th century. It was belt driven, and it was some kind of precision tool. But in order to get the maximum precision out of it, it had to be embedded. It had to sit in this square box of sand, so that it which was on top of a concrete floor. So the whole thing depended on its stability and its absolute steadiness. So it's a good metaphor for when we're working with, to manifest something. As a square is also symbol for manifestation. When we're trying to manifest something, we want to create a stable platform on which to build it in mind. That makes sense? So, and also, we have the aspect of, well, there's, along with stability is balance. So balance is, again, with that axis mundi exercise, it makes a person extremely well balanced. And it also locates your center of gravity within your torso, not in your head. So if your center of gravity is down in your body, you'll have a much easier time, say, like walking on ice, because you're more stable, you're balanced, your center of gravity is lower. And here again, we have kind of the aspect of bringing something into manifestation, because we're bringing it out of our head down into our body. You see, that's the direction. And this is what, what's being shown to us in the symbol of the Yod-He Vav-He and the 4 elements of creation. It's like in the 4 elements, you have fire, which is the least dense, most volatile. You have air, which is a little denser, then water, which is way denser, and then finally earth. That's going from the least dense, most active, down into the most dense and most stable. You see, there's the operation.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it all works together. You see, and there are a lot of moving pieces to it, but I think that's why we have these simple symbols, is because they act as a key to all of these different areas of knowledge that pertain. It's like there are aspects in mind. Those aspects show up, they outpicture themselves into the world. So the square is conceptually is part of the way our mind works. It's how creation, it's the tension of the opposites in a cross pattern that brings things into manifestation. So that shows up in everything. It'll show up in chemistry, it'll show up in physics, it'll show up in medicine, pharmacology, environment, everything. So these are like the 3 You know, the three primary symbols are the circle, the triangle, and the square. So as practicing mystics, then we want to master these symbols, because they're our tools, right? They are the tools that we use. And they're so generic, they're so universal, that there's no place they can't operate. And we have the circle, we have the triangle. Remember, we were talking about the triangle, how if you bring it into essentially it's about two things. It's about process, but it's also about relationship. Because remember in the movie The Matrix, where they had the loading platform, where Neo and Morpheus were in this place that was all white. There was just them, and I think maybe a chair and a TV props sitting there. And Neo asks, what is this? Well, this is our loading platform, within which we can bring anything that we need. And so it's.
Yeah, you're frozen, Michael.
What's that?
All right, you're back. You're frozen for about 30 seconds.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got a little notice there that said my connection was wonky.
So yeah, they were in the white space.
Yeah, and so that's a place where you can create, right? And so if you were in that kind of space and there weren't any props and there was just you and one other person, there would be no depth perception. And say that you're with one other person, you're in a completely white world like that with no points of reference, and neither one of you has a body except you're just a dot, eyeball, one dot looking at another dot. There would be no way to judge your relationship with that other thing, that other person. It would be impossible. You wouldn't even know how close or how far apart you were, up or down. There would be no up and down. So, but when you introduce a third thing, then the possibilities start to arise, where then you have, you can come in, you have size, you have relationship at that moment, you see. But it takes three points of awareness in order to form that. So, from that we get the Trinity and everything that pertains to the process of creation. All right, well, I'm doing all the talking. What do you guys think? So how can we use these? How can we use this knowledge? I mean, that's really the point, isn't it? That's where it really.
Absolutely.
We could talk about magic. You want to talk about magic? Using the symbols. So here's like if you're walking down the street and you're not certain of the mood or the the safety or the stability of the area you're walking through, you can draw a circle around you. You visualize a circle, both on the ground or up around mid-level. And you should try this, just like at work or when you're shopping. Create that circle around you and really put like more than half of your attention on it. Really see it, really bring it into consciousness. And then and not only that, but draw energy into it so that it becomes alive, where you sense it as that it has a livingness to it. And then watch how other people react to it. See what happens, see what effect that it has in the world.
I actually, Michael, have done exactly that very same thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I was really surprised that the reaction was immediate.
Yeah.
It was very noticeable.
Right, right. And the other example about the square that I've given is where you put your attention. If you're driving on ice, you put your attention on the four wheels of the car, and your sense of contact with the road just goes to 100%.
Hmm.
It's kind of it's this is where mind and body start to really come together, because if you do that in your body, if you drop your center of gravity down into your torso, or even down around your belly button, you're much more stable. But when you're driving a car, it's different. Then the car is your body, but you're doing it in mind because you're visualizing the four wheels.
That's,
You see?
yeah. So, so I've seen, obviously you see the three symbols nested together, the circle, the square, and the triangle. It's very common. You see that people have it as a bumper sticker and such. And I know the Rosicrucians have a lot to say about the triangle and manifestation. The idea of the square being used in manifestation is a new idea for me. But when we're talking about how everything works together, and that the square is involved in manifestation too, and I've never made that connection between the four elements and the square. Mm-hmm. And the way you said how one comes after another in becoming more and more dense, which made a whole lot of sense. So I guess I'm starting to maybe have a little bit of insight about why those three symbols, you see them nested together, because they obviously all three work together.
That's right. Yep. Just like the triangle is always depicted as an equilateral triangle, because if you take any one of the three elements away, the whole thing disappears. The reason it's an equilateral triangle is because all three are integral to each other. They all three have to be there. The same with the square, of course.
So I think I have a basic understanding of how to use the triangle for manifestation, and I've worked with that.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure I see how to practically use the square, unless what you're saying is that we apply the square in centering ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Is there more?
Yeah, because
obviously there is.
Yeah, well, no, it's but it's not always obvious, But like, say you want to plan something, we're back to like the table or the workbench, where you then lay out the plans on this, because it's a plane, right? A
Mm-hmm.
table is a plane.
Mm-hmm.
So now just even that word, we have to look at it in two different levels simultaneously. It's a plane physically, it's a physical plane, it's planar, mm-hmm. But it's also what a plane is in the mind. You see, what a plane does in the physical, which is allow us to arrange many different parts and then put them together, take them apart, work with them. That same, we have to do that in mind. We have to put everything on the same level if we're going to compare, how they say apples to apples, that kind of thing. That kind of gets at what a plane is in the mind. So there's that practicality to it, and also it's like, well, in Native American rituals, there's always the acknowledgement of the four directions.
Yeah.
And so, wow, what is that? What's that about? What are the four directions? Are they arbitrary, or are they just, why four? Why not five? Well, primarily because we're dealing with a cross, a cosmic cross, and that's the axis of the Earth and the equator of the Earth. So, and what that is you've got a center pole or a center lodge pole, you know, in the main structure in an Indian village. You've got the lodge pole, and then around it revolves everything. You see, there we have the circle and with the dot principle, but also when we enclose that in a boundaried space, then we have the square. You see, and with the same principle, because within that cube, within the square is the cross. You see the central axis and the plane. And you know, we look at that, we see that in the Hubble photographs of these extraordinary I forget what they're called. I don't think they're a galaxy, maybe a pulsar or something, but everything is like in a disc shape. Every organized structure out there is in a disc shape, which means it has a central axis, and then everything else flattens out into a single plane around it. You know, roughly. I mean, there's always exceptions. And a nebula is totally disorganized. But within organized structures, which mean it's spinning, you have that central axis, and then you have the cross.
Mhm.
You see, this is so fundamental. I mean, it's like it's so descriptive. So that, yeah, sorry.
I was just going to ask a question. So is that principle used then when you set up your altar?
Oh yeah,
The altar representing the square, even though most of the time it's not really square, it's more
right.
oblong. But then you have your cross in the middle, don't you? I can't remember how you.
Yes.
But then you have your triangle with your candles, and then the light being around you.
That's right.
Right. Okay.
What we're dealing with an altar is a table. It's the archetype is one of table. So we're using it to as a plane, a specified plane, right? We're wanting everything to happen here, but we're using the vertical axis as well because we're bringing energy down. We want it to manifest here at this plane.
So the altar almost represents the middle of the axis, actually, because you don't go all the way down to the ground and you don't go all the way up. So it's kind of that middle axis there, right?
Yeah, well, it is all the way to the ground in the sense it's into physicality. Because this is where we say, you know, the wine and the bread is actually transmuted. There's actually physical change taking place. And that's what we hold in mind when we do that, so that happens. Or that, you know, if we lay our hands on somebody's head and we call down a healing, that happens. You see, and by definition, that means it manifests.
Right. Okay.
So Michael,
Yeah.
you were talking in the beginning or towards the beginning about, you know, out of our head into our body, and then you say fire, air. You're going through the different elements, the density of them, right? Fire being the lightest, earth the heaviest. So if you're looking at our body, if you're looking at our head and it going into our body, how would you translate that? So what would fire be? Thought? Would you do it like that?
I believe the fire would be the will. So it's the emergence.
Yeah.
You know, like the sign Aries, the first fire sign in the zodiac, has that symbol like this. It looks like a sprouting plant.
Oh yes, yeah, yeah.
But it also looks like a fountain.
Yes, yeah, okay.
But what it shows is that something is coming up out of the unseen and into the seen.
Okay.
So an Aries thought would be something like, let's go on a vacation. You see, kind of comes, it comes out of seemingly nowhere, but once it's spoken, it's out, it's there. You see, it instigates something. So in the four elements of creation, that element would be the beginning. You see, that's the fire aspect of it. That's the, let's get this going. Let's start something.
All right, and then the air, Gemini.
Well, the air is then, okay, let's plan it. Let's think it through. Let's make, let's conceptualize it so that if there's anything wrong with our plans, we'll know before we actually, invest in them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much. What about the water?
Well, the water is like in alchemical sense, the water is like in the abdomen, it's your guts, right? This is where all the watery part of us is. Some of us way more than others.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking of myself.
I'm thinking of myself.
I was just, it's like, uh-oh. but this is where...
Isn't that Cancer? You're talking about the beginnings of the zodiac or not?
Well, yeah, Cancer would definitely relate to that because it's feeling, right?
Yep.
And feeling, not just emotional feeling, but real psychic feeling, where you get a real sense of something. In the air, in the mind, we just get the outline and the idea of it. But then when an idea really clicks, in other words, it kind of shows its connection to the earth, like a little lightning bolt goes between the two, then we get a feeling for it. It's like, ooh, yeah, that feels right. You see, we have the, we have the idea, we then plan it, we start to think about it, conceptualize it, and then it clicks, right? And then the earth is the action. It's getting into the action.
Okay, and so what would that be? Drawing a blank on my Aries, Gemini, Cancer. What's the next one? What's Earth? What's Earth?
Yeah, probably Taurus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Would that make sense?
Yeah, there's certainly mode of action,
Okay.
Mode of power.
All right. So that's how we plan a vacation.
Yeah.
All right.
But when you're stuck in the humdrum of work, vacation doesn't usually, unless you're really dissatisfied and you're thinking about it a lot, but usually it comes like a bolt out of the blue, and then it just pops up, just like the Aries symbol, it pops up and there it is. But once it's there, you can't put it back in, right? Like fire, once you start fire, it's there.
All right, so here's my next question. So we have the four symbols, right? Going from manifestation to, from thought or, inspiration to manifestation. Can you put that in the square?
Let's see. What do you see?
I'm asking you. That's what I see.
Well, that's no fair. You asked the question, you should have the answer.
No. That's why you're the teacher. No, seriously, how would you start? Because you're talking about this is all about symbology, right? That means you're using it. So how do we use it? If we have a square, we have the four signs, we have the opposing, we have the two oppositions. How would you put that in the square? Or would you?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
One thing that comes to mind is a loom.
I'm sorry, what?
A loom.
A loom?
L-O-O-M, loom, where you weave fabric or a tapestry or a rug. What does it involve? It's a grid, right? It starts off as a grid. You have two opposing lines of force or tension. You see, and within those, within that squared form, you can weave intricate, infinite number of intricate patterns, all on a single plane.
All right. So
So-
there's no real opposition, or
There's no what?
there's no opposition. Maybe I'm just being too picturesque, but I'm thinking, one on one side, one on the other, the four.
Yeah, there's the
putting them on
tension.
four sides.
There's the tension.
Yeah.
From
But
side to
which one?
side.
Yeah. What goes where? I'm being really practical here. Sorry.
Yeah, well, there has to be, when you're at a loom, there has to be the side to side tension
Yeah.
and the fore and aft tension.
Yeah.
That sets up the the tension of opposites. And then
Yes.
on that scaffold, which is a force, like a force field,
You pull
that
it
then
back.
becomes the platform on which you build.
Yeah.
Now again, we're talking in terms of symbols. So that's at one level, that's at the the physical level. Just imagine how that works conceptually in the mind when you're working with ideas. You've got 4 points, the 4 directions. So you've got 4 things that are in dynamic balance or trying to achieve a balance. You see, and usually this shows up as just 2 things, right? Because normally if we have a problem, it's just 2 things that we're trying to reconcile, like on a balance sheet. Two things we're trying to reconcile. But within that, each one of those has its own polarity. So that's where it goes into 4. Each element, whenever we're working with an element, it's like the yin yang symbol.
Okay.
There's 4 there. There's the 2 thingies,
Yes.
and then there's a dot in each one. That's 4. It's 4 elements.
Yep.
So
Okay.
yeah, the important thing to get in studying symbols is that they operate on many levels simultaneously. And it's, so you have to just think what this does for our minds. Whoever gave this information to us was really interested in our evolution, because this sets us up for abstract thinking. You see, we can deal with things on the physical level like a table, but we can plan on that table. We can draw like blueprints for a house. But if we weren't able to think abstractly, that blueprint would just be a picture, it would just be lines on paper. But what abstract thinking enables us to do is to look at that diagram and envision a house. We're able to abstract that information off a 2-dimensional surface into a 3-dimensional concept, visualization,
Okay.
and then ultimately into reality. So this is why these things are part of the ancient wisdom teachings, is that they're not just interesting concepts, interesting philosophy. These describe how the mind works.
So how would you start to use that?
Which part?
If you were, let's say we're your students, you're a teacher, and you're teaching, how are we going to use it? How can we practice it?
Well, I gave you the exercise of the Axis Mundi.
Yeah. Okay.
Why don't you describe how that worked for you?
Yeah, it worked like very well. You're right, very centering. Yes, very centering. And your whole perception of your surroundings changes. It becomes clearer. You're more in the present, definitely in the present, right? Yeah.
Greg and Renee, do you know what we're talking about?
No, I was gonna ask what it was that she did, or,
Yeah, go ahead, you tell them.
no, you tell me,
Yeah, Renee or Rosemary, you tell them.
I wanna know what you did.
Yeah, what did I do? Well, Michael gave me this, in the beginning, Michael gave me this exercise. I think I started out with the vertical. So just putting a line through my entire body. And I was walking around doing that for a while, for a few weeks. And then I added the horizontal. And the fun thing about the horizontal was, because he wouldn't tell me where the two meet. So I was kind of playing around. I'd be walking, and I'd start with a horizontal up here in my throat, which felt really weird. And, and one time I like below my navel, and that felt even weirder. So it was just a matter of just where my actual center of balance was, basically what I was trying to find out. And I just did that on my own. And I found that. So that was good. And then, of course, the sideways one as well, because there's 3 axes, right? There's the X, Y, Z. So eventually then you have a cube. And yes, and then I was walking back and forth. The first few days was literally just even having, because you're imagining this in your mind, right? You have it in your mind. And even just keeping it there was an exercise. But after a while, it becomes very natural. And yeah, like I said, balanced, being in the present. And actually, this was interesting, was just having more color. That sounds crazy, but it's like there was more of a realness to your surroundings when you were doing this, versus you're just walking around thinking about what you're going to have for lunch, kind of thing. So yeah, it really brought you more into the present. That's how I can explain it.
That's great. That's great.
Try it, Renee.
Okay, I will. Well, I have a question. When you say, okay, you visualize it coming down through your head and then down, okay, and then horizontally was across. So do you just see like a single strand, or do you see something actually like through your head all the way? So you're kind of dividing your body into four sections.
Yeah, I don't know if that's what I did that because, I studied anatomy and physiology. So I'd look at the picture and that's exactly what happened. These bodies were literally cut into like 8 pieces. So that's kind of what I did. And and it worked. And the last, because now that I'm thinking about it, I keep remembering everything that happened. And then one part that happened was towards the end, the lines actually became golden. I didn't consciously make that happen. It literally just kind of happened. So, I think everybody's going to be different with that.
Yeah.
Start, see where it takes you. So,
Yeah, whenever you draw a line in mind, that you automatically draw energy into it. So essentially it's a line of force or it's a line of light, especially the vertical one.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know when we do some of our other exercises, we see like we bring the light down through our head, and I've always visualized that as being like a spear, like a spear of light, or a strand, I guess, going through. And so that's why I was asking, is it like a strand and then a strand across, or are we actually seeing like a plate going down and a plate going across?
When I do it, I think of it in terms of a vertical line.
Yeah, me too.
And when I say that, I mean perfectly vertical. So, and what that means is that it extends from the center of the earth straight out away from the center of mass.
Okay.
That's a perfectly vertical line.
But
So,
Michael,
yeah.
You say perfectly vertical, but I think here's something else to watch out for is if you're trying to draw a vertical line and it's crooked, there's a reason why it's crooked.
And that's the reason is what?
Maybe you're not balanced.
Ah, okay.
Does that make
Did you
sense?
experience that when you did the exercise?
Yeah, one day I did. I was kind of being flaky, and I had a really hard time. It was one of those days, right? But anyway, where it's hard, sometimes it's hard to have it be straight up and down, and it's,
Yeah.
Yeah. So it tells you a lot. It tells you a lot about where you are at on any given day, right? I know
Yeah.
you're laughing, but it's true.
Well, think of it this way. Say if you know what the word planet means? It's Greek. It comes from the Greek word planetos. It means wanderer.
Okay.
Remember the
I like
prayer,
that.
nameless wanderer?
Yes, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And
So, and there was that idea in medieval ages where everyone believed that the earth was the center of the universe and everything else went around it.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, that's actually true,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything moves. You are always in the exact center of the universe.
true.
So, Rosemary, what you should try next then is when you're laying in bed, do the exercise.
All right. Are you serious? So do it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
because how did I define a vertical line? I defined it in terms of the planet, right?
Yep.
Okay, so if you're a planet, which you are because you are orbiting around the sun
Yeah.
in space,
Yeah.
you just have this other planet attached to you, right? But you're really the center, you see? So just like you're out in space, if you're way out in space, there is no up or down, right?
Yeah.
You are the up and down.
Well, then it really wouldn't matter. I mean, you'd still have the three lines, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's
All right, but I
tricky.
will do it.
It's tricky, but because we're so used to gravity,
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Okay.
it's a hell of an exercise.
All right.
Because you have to separate yourself from all other points of reference, right? You have to become your own points of reference.
Yep.
All right. So raise that up a level. What is it like in your thinking, in your mind, and your sense of who you are and your sense making in the world? What happens when you become your own point of reference in that? You see, you're no longer at the beck and call of everyone else's opinion. In conventionalism, they would say that you have presence of mind, or you are self-possessed. You see,
Okay.
which is exactly what that exercise does. Is it puts you in possession of yourself, because you then become that intersection, and that's the most stable place in all universes.
Okay. All right. We'll do my homework.
So there's a lot to this, as you can see, and it's worth. But the thing is, you want to stay as simple as possible, because the simpler you keep these symbols, the more universal they become.
Okay.
One of the biggest benefit, though, is symbols, because they operate on different levels. The more you understand that, the more you work with that, then the more you're able to think on different levels simultaneously. It makes you way more intelligent. And this is real intelligence. We're not talking about just IQ, or this is like felt sense of reality. You see, and it doesn't require a lot of brain cells. It requires, it has more to do with how whole a person you are, how complete a person you are, not how brainy you are.
Okay.
So the simpler, the better.
It's interesting you say whole, because whole, and I always think when you say whole, I think of holy.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that was the big revelation in the 70s, wasn't it? Whole,
Yeah.
holy,
Yep.
wholeness.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, complete, complete. All the parts are there. No leftover parts.
Yeah.
No missing parts.
Cool.
Well, okay. Last chance.
Of what?
Questions?
Well, I'm done. I think I've asked enough. Go ahead, Renee. Greg, go for it.
Pray. Are we ending?
No, do you have a question?
No, I don't. No.
Oh, okay. No more
I
questions.
thought you said, go ahead and pray.
Oh, okay. All right, well, you can. That'd be great.
Yeah.
You want to end? You're ending now?
Yeah.
Okay. Kind of a roundabout way, but we're getting there. Hmm. Heavenly Father, thank you again for bringing us all together, opening our minds and our hearts, and letting these teachings be heard by each of us. Help us this week as we go forth and do the exercises we've been given. Let the light of our Lord be with us. And bless each one here. In thy name and in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Renee.
Thank you, Michael. Nice to meet you, Greg.
Nice to meet you too.
Right.
Well, God, I could go on for another hour, but
I know that was great. I got like 4 pages out of this class, I think. So I got to read all this. That's great.
I know. It's a lot. It's really a lot.
You have
It's
to let
very
us
interesting.
truly.
That's good. That's good.
Otherwise, it's, yeah, a lot.
All
So I
right.
want to know next week when you come back, Rosemary, if you're laying down doing that exercise, let us know if you elevate. When you were saying that, I was picturing her, kind of elevating right up there. That'd be great.
Just levitate right off the bed, right?
Yeah, just live it. Yeah.
That I want to hear about.
Yeah. Me too.
So do I.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have to do the walking. You start
Yeah.
walking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
I'm
walk,
gonna-
I'll do it in bed.
Okay. All right. We'll share next week. Thank
Okay,
you, guys.
Yeah.
Have a
Thank
nice
you, Michael.
evening.
Yeah. Good
You
night.
too.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.